Welcome to Crossover the Pond, brought to you by 21 Media Productions and Sports Social. He's Drew Lasker, I'm Josh Sexton. This is another episode as we continue our NBA basketball journey, a short hezzy tween and stutter step away here in the UK. The playoffs are moving on thick and fast. We are now at the conference semi-final stage. Two of the conference finalists are already decided, but we want to start with the most recent games. So we're going to be reacting to those in sort of order of recency, and then we'll get to the ones that have swept the competition away, let's just say. But before I get into all that, of course, the first and most important question I have to ask is, Drew, how you doing, my man?
I mean, is anyone else out there sleeping patterns all screwed up?
Oh, mate, mine's bad. Mine is bad.
I mean, after covering San Antonio and Minnesota on Friday night, uh, I caught a train at 7 a.m. straight from London all the way to Northumberland and met up with my family in a what do you call a caravan, which it was my first caravan holiday, by the way. And we
Nice.
we met up there with a couple of friends, but like I didn't sleep, so I went all the way through, and it's like 16 of us. And by 8 o'clock at the pub, I just had to say, "Hey guys, good night." Like I could not hang, but yeah, set my alarm last night to watch this game. Yeah, the NBA it takes a toll, man. How about you?
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I just want to say first and foremost, Drew, if you're doing caravan holidays, you are certified British now. Americans can't claim you anymore. That means you're one of us.
They've been
Um,
asking me to come on this holiday for like 3 years now, and I was like, "No, I'm more of a five-star fluffy towel type of guy, not a caravan." But no, it was cool. The kids loved it, so it was cool.
Absolutely, you can pack the fluffy towels as well. I'm sure you've got some of them, some of them in the house. But yeah, I've been the same. Honestly, I was up to like 4 a.m. watching the games yesterday. I made the sort of the decision not to do that, the executive decision not to do that last night. I'm trying to sort of stagger it, so I'm like the nights where there are the most games is when I'll do like the latest staying up because there was only one last night. I was like, I'll just watch that in the morning. Me and you were recording later. We're actually recording this slightly later for the listeners as well. We'd made some predictions in the last show about where we'd be up to in the game four stage. Of course, two of the series ended at game four, so that's kind of handy for us. Not necessarily handy for one of our predictions of the series at least, but San Antonio and Minnesota were at game five stage last night. So we'll start with that, Drew. Me and you had both predicted that this would be 2-2 at this stage. Going about how we planned it really so far, there's definitely been like narratives and things that have jumped out from there. Of course, there was Wemby and the elbow in the last game and the potential suspension going into this one. Being honest, I was kind of pleased. Like, I understand Minnesota Timberwolves fans who would not want to see Wemby on the court, especially given how little of the Minnesota Timberwolves, like, I wouldn't say star cast, but at least beyond the sort of, third and fourth options that we're not seeing on the court. But I'm pleased that the NBA kind of at least went with like the entertaining decision here of no, we're going to make sure that the best player in this series, arguably anyway, if you want to, if you're listening, Anthony Edwards, arguably the best player in the series is still on the court, and boy, did he serve us up a treat last night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you think this was an entertainment decision, or do you think it was a history? Because if this was Draymond Green, would he have been suspended?
Quite possibly, yeah. I think it probably helps that Victor isn't necessarily like an aggressive player or whatever. Like, I could go either way because when I watched it, like all the intent is there. He literally pauses. You can see the cogs kind of, quickly but still tick in his head before he decides to like swing the elbow. It's a retaliation and things like that. So like, there's maybe like an integrity of the game decision there, but like we're in the second round of the playoffs. Like I'm kind of not here for like integrity of the game decisions. It was a stupid move by Wemby. It's going to hurt his pocket. I don't know if that fine number already came out rather than the suspension number, but
Well,
I'm
he didn't
sure
get
it will.
fined at all.
Oh, really? So there's no punishment at all.
There's no fine. I think what they took into consideration is how early it happened. It happened, early in the second quarter. So practically he's missed a game. Like if this happened the last minute of the fourth quarter, I think he gets that suspension. But I'm with you that we need the best players on the court. But I'm thinking about it, in the future that San Antonio has to get through because for me, they are the only team that matches up really well with OKC. I don't see there's any chance that Minnesota can keep up. So it's just trajectorying exactly how we envision. And yeah, we said it was 2-2. We both you and I predicted it was going to be 2-2. And the thing that's really stood out to me in this series, Josh, is that the response from both teams of being able to bounce back. Like, San Antonio seems to have a lot more urgency when they lose. They have a lot more energy, a lot more aggression. Although Minnesota, they've been able to respond under pressure because their wins have come, down the stretch in the fourth quarter. They've had two fourth quarter comebacks. By the way, they've had 15 fourth quarter comebacks this season, which is tied with Cleveland. So, that's what they do. And been very impressed with Anthony Edwards because I believe I mentioned it on here last week that his knee wasn't going to get any better. And they've only had one day in between these games. Going into game 6, they get 2 days, which, Anthony Edwards says it's a blessing. But I've been impressed with his mentality about really not only, muscling and mustering through, but like not really allowing it to hinder him. Like that game 4 performance was incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and you kind of said that, we expected this to go 2-2. I don't know if you predicted 7 or 6, Drew. I certainly said 6 to the Spurs in this one because
Six.
I kind of imagined that the Minnesota Timberwolves would run out of steam. It was a little bit the way it looked last night. Like there was definitely points where you could see the energy just really dipped in Minnesota, that they were just kind of like jacking up threes, and didn't have his greatest game of the series last night. But as you say, like he's been so impressive this series, even to have made it to this point. Still plays 39 minutes, by the way, last night on those bad knees. So like I have to give a lot of credit to the Minnesota Timberwolves for even getting to the stage. I'm in the same boat as you, that even if I'm a New York Knicks fan watching the OKC Thunder or this series at the moment, I'm willing for the San Antonio Spurs to get through, because otherwise, like if the Minnesota Timberwolves did manage to get through, I could only really see another sweep. And the idea that the Golden State Warriors go 12-0 before they get to play the New York Knicks, in the finals, because I'm just from this point assuming that New York gets through with everything I've been served up from Detroit and Cleveland. But we'll save that just stage left for now, for when we can get into that. But like San Antonio kind of needs to win this series for the sake of the NBA. I have to say, Drew, within one of those dips of energy last night, the point I kind of, I don't know, I enjoyed, because I quite enjoy like the arcs of all stories. So like the hero to villain or villain to hero. I loved Jaden McDaniels and everything he served up to us in terms of entertainment in the last series. But there was a point where he sat on the bench last night, he threw his towel on the floor, and all I could think in my head was my soundtrack with Kendrick Lamar going, "Them superpowers get neutralized. I can only watch in silence."
Yeah, what you see the difference as you start to as the playoffs begin to evolutionize. I don't even know if that's a word, but we're in the second round, and it continues to come to those threes that you need, that depth, that youth, that length. And although Minnesota has depth now, what they were able to, get garner at the trade deadline, now you start to see the quality of depth, the difference, because when you look at San Antonio, I mean, just look at the box score from last night, right? So you got obviously Victor. I'm not even going to talk about his numbers because he's automatic. Anthony Edwards, they X each other out. But it's who else can put the team on your back? Who else can get you a 20 ball? Well, you look up De'Aaron Fox. He had 24, and he has not been efficient at all this series. He's had 20 plus the last 2 games. Now it's Vassell that's 20 plus. In game 4, it was Stefan Castle who only had 17 points last night. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the plus minus. Sorry about that. Looking at the plus minus. However, it's Keldon Johnson who has 20 plus, and to go along with Victor Wembanyama. But my point is that you look at game 4, you got De'Aaron Fox, you got Stefan Castle, you got Dylan Harper. You can point to 5 guys who that can get you 20. Champagne, if he gets on a heater, he can get you 20. Vassell, maybe, but for sure Fox, Castle, Harper definitely. And Keldon Johnson, he's not been great this whole playoffs, but we know he is capable of getting 20. When you look on the other side for the Timberwolves, Gobert's not going to give you 20. Jaden McDaniels, it looks like he's kind of run out of steam, as you just alluded to with the Kendrick Lamar lyrics. Desomu, like he had that big game, but I think that was a one-trick pony. You don't see that happening consistently. Nas Reed has not had a great season, let alone playoff series. And then you look at, okay, who else? Julius Randle. But am I going to put my money on him getting you 20 right now after, he had 17 last night. But before then, he had 3 straight games with 12 points. they just don't have enough to be able to keep up with the team like San Antonio that has this much firepower. And although just the Timberwolves are a top 10 defensive rating team over the course of the season, it's too many guys on San Antonio to keep down. If you look at the season series thus far, it's been 2 games where the Timberwolves have scored under 100 points. Whereas San Antonio, although they've lost 2 games, they've at least been able to eclipse 100 points. So you're not going to be able to keep them down. So the key for Minnesota is you have to continue scoring to beat San Antonio. The same thing with OKC, the same thing with New York. Like these teams, yeah, you got to be able to defend, but you got to be able to score because they're going to have multiple guys that's able to score in these series. That's why when you look at the East, which we'll talk about later, New York is the only team that can match up with San Antonio and OKC when it talks about the ability to keep scoring.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing, both high quality offense and defense, particularly in this series, but throughout the playoffs, really, like I genuinely do want to give a shout out as much as I'm, gonna come on here and be, critical of some teams because we're kind of nitpicking little things as well. The offense and defense been on a really high level. I enjoyed you reading the box score plus minus, by the way, Drew, because partly because it showed how mashed up our sleeping patterns are and how mashed up our brains are by these sleeping patterns at the moment, but genuinely because like a lot of people look at the plus minus and that there is some things you can take from the plus minus. I think you always have to take things with a pinch of salt. Like the minute I saw Jaden McDaniels in that situation last night, I kind of went to the plus minus almost to be like, right, okay, I know I'm going to come into this with my own sort of perspective on it, but like, what did he look like in the plus minus? And of course, when a team gets blown out, everyone's plus minus is going to be, a high minus really, and the other teams is going to be a high plus. But, as I say, when we're seeing high quality offense, when we're seeing high quality defense, it's how much can you stop someone possession to possession. And I just think defensive versatility here, the San Antonio Spurs might have that wrapped over the Timberwolves, which is kind of like crazy when you look at the Timberwolves starting five. At the very least, is where they definitely lack the depth. Now they've had a couple of injuries and things, but that starting five where it is Jaden McDaniels who has so much length, and Julius Randle, even though he's not the greatest defender all the time, when he locks in, he's got great size and great length. He's not someone who can be bullied in the paint. Rudy Gobert, one of the best defensive players of all time, arguably. Ayo Dosunmu, length and a great defender, and even Naz Reid and guys to come off the bench there who can be great defenders. But on the San Antonio Spurs side, basically to a man, everybody throughout that team is a good defender besides maybe De'Aaron Fox. And even then, I feel like De'Aaron Fox is so quick and he's so in the passing lanes, and everyone else is like, a bigger body, that they're the ones who can kind of like, almost negate for what De'Aaron Fox has to do in terms of like being a big body and just being so quick and having such a quick twitch on defense that it kind of doesn't ever get exposed. And that's the like high level defensive matchup that we're talking about at this stage.
Yeah, De'Aaron Fox is a more opportunistic defensive player because he can get in the passing lanes. He can hunt steals on the weak side, so that makes up for not necessarily being a great on-ball defender. But I mean, game two, he showed that he can at least press up and add pressure there.
Sure.
Um, yeah, I think I want to go back to your plus minus because some of our listeners might not understand what that stat actually means. It means that are you losing or winning points when you're on the floor? And you do have to take that stat with a pinch of salt because sometimes it's matchup depending, like who's on the floor with you. So I don't use it as the Bible, but it can give you it can give you some great information. So, for example, last night the Timberwolves lost by 29 points. Anthony Edwards was a -9, so that means that they lost the game by 20 points when he wasn't on the floor, right? And then if you dive deeper, well, Anthony Edwards played 39 minutes, and this is where the plus minus really tells a story. Anthony Edwards played 39 minutes. Julius Randle played 36 minutes, but Julius Randle was a -22 when he was on the floor. So that's when it really tells the difference about, like, okay, so Julius Randle is not able to steady the ship in those minutes when Ant is on the bench because that stat tells you that those minutes are staggered, right? He's playing 36, you're playing 39. It wouldn't be that big discrepancy. That just means that there was a times where Anthony Edwards was on the bench that Julius Randle was on the court, and him not being able to step up into that Robin role, it's what's really going to have the Minnesota Timberwolves, by the time we return to recording, be out of the playoffs and really be examining this roster about what they need, because this will be you know, 3 consecutive years where they were knocking on the door and not able to burst through.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they make any big moves in the off season once the series is over. But I think me and Drew both kind of alluding to that. We're sticking to our 6 game prediction for this one. Expect San Antonio to go and pick up these next 2 games now and surge forward with that momentum. And then, boy, that conference finals matchup will be juicy. But we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about the OKC Thunder's side of the bracket. I just want to talk about one of the other series that's still alive, Drew. So flipping over to the East with the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Detroit Pistons, because again, it's been another series that's kind of been like full of narratives. The James Harden narrative, and not necessarily stepping up to the plate has been there again. I've felt a little bit of sympathy for James in the sense that, like, I think he's shown in the last few years that you kind of need to have him in that third option role. I thought maybe that could be the case with Cleveland, even though I had big question marks out the season, as I've always said on the podcast about Evan Mobley, and how he's not been able to step up to be a bona fide second option this series, especially when Darius Garland was going through his health issues earlier in the season. And that's kind of reared its head again in these playoffs, and suddenly James Harden is expected to be the second option on this team, and maybe that's what the Cleveland Cavaliers thought they were trading for. I have to be honest, like, as a Clippers fan who's watched James Harden for the last few years, that was very naive. They thought that was what they were trading for. Like, he's still being guarded by Cade Cunningham, which I'm sure Donovan Mitchell is very, very grateful for, because Cade Cunningham has shown to me in this series, at least, that he is the best player in this series. I think I said that on the last episode of the pod anyway, but like, I think that's only been solidified by the play we've seen from him in this series. But Donovan Mitchell disappointed me, to be honest, throughout those first 2 games, and it's not like the scoring isn't necessarily there. It's more the overall play for me. It's more how you kind of leave James Harden on an island with Cade Cunningham, and yes, it's a lot of unforced errors and things like that, but that's what happens when you have an elite defender in front of you, when you're an old guy, and when really you only know to go at one pace. So I've been finding myself in a little bit sorry for James Harden, but neither him nor Donovan Mitchell needed me to in this game for. I mean, at first Donovan Mitchell definitely did. That first half was feeding all kinds of mighty narratives when James Harden had 15 in the first half and Donovan Mitchell had like 4 or something. But a historic second half from him to turn it around in game 4. And I had this series going 7. I'd predicted that Cleveland would be 3-1 up, and as I say, they've kind of disappointed me really in that sense. I honestly don't know on which side of the fence I sit on this now, Drew. I think you had this going 7-2 and going as like a home matchup series again, unless it was a Cleveland matchup series that you kind of had it going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where I stand now on this. For me, it's almost a flip of a coin.
Yeah, I predicted this to be a home series and to be 2-2, just like uh, it has unfolded. I can't remember if I picked Cleveland or Detroit, actually. I think I might have picked Cleveland in game 7
Right.
to pick up their first road win. I think that's the direction that I went. And I still see it unfolding that way because I just like to think like when the chips are in the middle of the table, Cleveland just has, you know, multiple guys. Again, that narrative that we keep running with on today's episode. But I think you owe Evan Mobley an apology. You've been hard on him all season,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
rightfully so. First 2 games, like he got outplayed by Jalen Duren. But since they've been home, he's been a lot better. He's been a lot more aggressive. He's been a lot more energetic. And you're starting to even see Jared Allen get engaged. If both of those two could really impose their will, then I just don't see how Detroit can keep up because what's happening with Jalen Duren is, I mean, it may seem unbelievable to a lot of people, but in my eyes, it doesn't because what this playoffs has really allowed us to see is, and it's been consistent that there's regular season guys and there's guys that have the tools in their arsenal to be able to pull it out when the defense is more attentive to their game. And I think that's where James Harden has really struggled in his playoff career is that he doesn't have that extra layer of artillery when we can focus on him for 7 games and really take away the things that we like to do and really target him defensively, like putting a big body like Cade Cunningham. I think the first 2 games, you could see it with Donovan Mitchell. It was almost, I wouldn't even say a tug of war. I would say that maybe a respect thing that maybe Donovan didn't feel like he wanted to step on James's shoes, but the light bulb late in that game too went off for Donovan Mitchell that, hey, actually I'm the best player on this team, and if we're gonna go far, it has to be with me. And you've seen you've seen that kind of play out in these last two games at home, and I really think that started in game two. And you can see James, recognizing that and deferring that. Okay, yeah, it is. This is your team, and I think this is the only way that Cleveland is going to be able to get it done. On the other hand, with Detroit, if Cade Cunningham doesn't play well, they just don't have a chance. I mean, Asar was probably his first bad playoff game there in game four. I think for Cleveland, for Detroit, excuse me, game four, it was all about Cleveland. I think they missed that opportunity in game three. Game three was their opportunity to take the bull from the horn, but they let it slip, and they've now given Cleveland, new life. And I think ultimately, like Cleveland is going to take it in game seven.
Yeah, I had this going seven, but I had Cleveland going up 3-1 and Detroit making a comeback. I did mention within that I saw this being quite a formative series for the Detroit Pistons, really, where ultimately they don't make it out of this series. But, this playoff run in general, the losses they had as well as the wins they had, they kind of managed to turn into lessons. And I think, like, the Twitter, you lose all nuance, don't you? And it's a hard place to sort of try and take anything from, really, because it's all so narrative based. And I've seen, all the narratives around Jalen Duren and how, like, he's lost a load of money throughout these playoffs and stuff like that. I'm kind of not really here for the pocket watching nature of that, to be honest. But I just think it will be formative, because I think if you're a player like Jalen Duren, who we did see develop during this regular season, we saw him almost take more like ball handling duties at times, where his offensive game went from being like just rim running and pick and rolls, and a guy who only really existed above the rim, to actually, like, if you put the ball in his hands, he can take down his man off the dribble and things like that. We did see a little bit more of that, especially in the early parts of the season. I think if you're just starting to, add that feather to your bow, then you're not necessarily going to be able to execute that in the playoffs. And you've mentioned giving credit to the front court of Mobley and Allen there, that against, a Twin Towers front court like that, it's going to be really, really hard to, just tap into something that you were learning in the first part of the season. But I still think if you're Detroit, there's no need to hit the panic button if you end up losing this series. I still think there's every chance that they could win it. Like, game seven would become a flip of a coin for me. So, we could be talking about Detroit in the finals. If we did, then I could be seeing a New York sweep. I do think that Cleveland would have something to say about at least a game or two against New York. But if you're Detroit from this point, I still just think you take a lot of credit and a lot to learn from these playoffs, and take that into the offseason with any kind of, roster decisions that you make.
I think you bring a good point up. There's no reason for, this Detroit Pistons team to panic. No one's expecting them to win it all this year. This is a fill out year for them. This is more urgent for Cleveland to get to the conference finals
For
than it is
sure.
for Detroit, right? Even if you're looking at someone like Jalen Duren, he's 22 years old. He didn't come into the NBA as a scorer. He was a dump off guy. There is the narrative that he's lost himself a ton of money. I don't agree with that. He's lost himself max dollars, because max dollars is the guy that could deliver in the playoffs, but he's still going to get a big deal, because you don't just average 19 and 10, and there is value averaging 19-10 in the regular season. It's 82 games. You're the number one seed. So he's going to get his money. He's not going to get max dollars, but I think what they will come out, Trajan Langan will come out to realize, is that Detroit needs a number two. Jalen will be perfect at that number three role, and you still give the young fella his money. He's going to continue to get better as well. He's going to continue to develop his offensive game, and I'll plug him in as the third will, and go hunt you a second guy next to Cade. So I think that's a little bit blown out of proportion. So this is more urgent for Cleveland to get it done. This is Detroit in a casino with a free bet, right? Just spinning the wheel. Let's see where it takes us. It may take us to the conference finals, it may not, but ultimately they're not going to get to the finals. So you hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're both kind of saying that this one's a toss of a coin, really. If Cleveland do lose, I think they've got far more to think about in this one. But I do expect, similar to you, Drew, that Cleveland gets this one done in 7 and meets the New York Knicks in the finals. So we will flip over to that New York Knicks Philadelphia 76ers. That felt hard to say for some reason all of a sudden. Series. I'll be honest, I expected more from the Sixers. Maybe that was, kind of an over expectation, really, given how beat up Joel Embiid was. We saw, very early on in this series, Joel Embiid missed time. It felt like it kind of came off that hard hit from Mikal Bridges as he was, going around Joel Embiid's screen. It hit him right in the area where that appendix surgery will have happened. He ends up missing it with like hip and ankle issues. I think they put it down as, and even the fact that there was like 2 injuries on the injury report for Joel Embiid, I was like, it's kind of a Joel Embiid thing, but also I have a lot of sympathy for that guy. Another great series by VJ Edgecombe. Like, I think VJ Edgecombe comes away with so much credit from this series, but I think the Sixers just ran out of steam, and all the questions that I've brought up over and over again about the New York Knicks this season, they might just be answering them at the exact right time, to be honest, Drew, because like you said, they're the only ones from the East that I would put up in that bracket with OKC and the San Antonio Spurs. And OKC may yet go on to prove that actually, they are just above that bracket, and it's the Spurs and the Knicks who are in the bracket just below. But New York, to me, have looked, a great basketball team genuinely throughout this playoffs. And the fact that I had this going 6, and I think I had it like as 3-1 to New York at this stage, and then going 6, and they just got it done with barely even a shout in the other direction, says that this basketball team is clicking just at the right time.
Yeah, there's something to be said about being battle tested, and the Atlanta Hawks was the best thing that ever happened to the New York Knicks because it allowed them to figure out that actually, if we want to go to the promised land, it can't be all about Brunson. We have to go through Cat, and that's been the switch with New York. They're running a lot through Cat now. Cat has averaged 2 assists in his playoff career. Well, he's averaging 8 assists ever since game 3 or 4 against Atlanta. So they're playing, and you starting to see. I mean, game 4 was everything you needed to see about the Knicks. I mean, that barrage of threes, guys. It was almost like an equal opportunity system, right? Specifically in that first half. And it's not 4 guys watching Brunson dribble, dribble, dribble. Now, Brunson is the guy that still gets the ball at the end of the shot clock, will still get the ball at the at the last 2 minutes. But this team has really uncovered that Cat is the key, and rightfully so, because as it's always been said, it's hard to win with a guard that's 6 foot and smaller as your main lead singer or as your only lead singer. So that's been the switch with New York. And man, all of a sudden they just look so deep, so many options, so strong. And with Philadelphia, it's no surprise. I picked them to lose in 5 games in New York. I thought they would pick up 1 in Philly. Game 3 was their opportunity. They let it slip out of their hands, similar to what Detroit did. I think for Philly, the toughest thing for them was continuity. The Joel Embiid situation paid dividends in the Boston series, but I really think it screwed him up against New York, specifically Maxey. Maxey, when he was in the line, there was a game he had 8 shots. That should never happen. And it's tough when you are alpha and you bring in another alpha, and once he comes back in, it's like that Donovan Mitchell, James Harden situation. Is it your turn? Is it my turn? Let me step away. I don't want to step on your shoes. It's easier to bring in a role player. Like if you were to bring in a Tobias Harris, it doesn't affect Maxey at all. And so I think the Joel Embiid really put the Philadelphia 76ers to their grave. And now when you start to look at the Paul George and Embiid contracts, Embiid contract kick in next year, he's owed 150 million over 3 years. Same with Paul George, and Daryl Morey got fired yesterday, and rightfully so, because this team all of a sudden they don't have a lot of options. Who's going to pick up the Paul George contract? Who's going to pick up the MB? The only way you're going to pick up an MB contract is, hey, you better put something. You better put something to that. I need a couple first round picks to that. So they're in a really tough spot, and I think what you see is what you're going to get moving forward, and what you're going to get is a team that's inconsistency from a roster standpoint, and that just does not have enough.
Yeah, they almost feel like a team that could have benefited from being bad for a little bit longer. So they had a couple more first round picks to get in there. They could keep on rookie scale contracts while you kind of wind down the Joel Embiid and Paul George contracts, because both of them proved, at times this season, I think Embiid ended up kind of slightly exceeding this, but they both proved to be really valuable role players, albeit on not role player contracts throughout the course of this season. As I say, I think Embiid did exceed that at times, and then, is the forever story with Joel Embiid, unfortunately, health did just let him down in the end. Was slightly disappointed by Maxi in this series. I think you were, kind of right to point that out. Still showed flashes, of course. Like, I think Tyrese Maxey is, a genuinely, brilliant NBA player. But, there's two games in this series where, like, just not enough shots from Maxey. You pointed out the one with 9 shots. There was another one with 12 shots. You've got to find a way to get your offense. Even one with 16, by the way, where he only had 17 points from that one really, inconsistent shooting series from him. And on the other side, I mentioned it, I think, on a podcast earlier in the season that we did, Drew, where I talked about the leaping shooting that the New York Knicks had made under Mike Brown. Now, Mike Brown has come in for a lot of criticism this series, but you see the way that New York closed out. Like, if you go to the box score, it looks like the box score is lying with the amount of Knicks players that shot like 70% from the field and like 60% from three. It was absolutely crazy how accurate this team was. And yes, that wasn't, completely sustainable throughout the whole playoffs, but I think you're seeing now the sort of dividends that have, been paid off in the coaching of Mike Brown, where, as you mentioned, it's not just like weapons to the arsenal for me. Like, it's not just depth, it's variety of offense that the New York Knicks have, where it's a guy like Brunson who will always get 2 feet in the paint, but who can also be a killer from 3 point range. Cat, similar, has got inside game and outside game. All the other guys, like Mikal Bridges, was getting a little bit of criticism in the last series against the Atlanta Hawks. He's now arrived at the party, and his shot is starting to fall. Josh Hart's shot is, still a little bit inconsistent because he's not a brilliant 3 point shooter, but, can still fall more often than not, where you can kind of be like, okay, well, as, the fifth guy in this starting lineup, we know if the ball ends up in his hands that we don't feel awful about it. I know Giannonobi has, really come on as the third option in this team throughout the whole course of the season, really, but as again, even gone a little bit further than that in this playoff series. So I'm really impressed with the New York Knicks at this stage. I think OG's out now, isn't he? I don't know how much longer he's going to be out for. They'll be hoping he comes back before that conference finals series starts. But if I'm New York, besides that, I have so many reasons to be excited.
Yeah, and with OG and specifically, you don't need him to win the conference finals. You just need him healthy for the finals. And right now, I mean, I'm looking at the New York's box score as well. I mean, you got Jeremy Sohan, who's a great defender, who was a starter for San Antonio for 3 years, who doesn't even touch the floor. Even Tyler Kolek, who had flashes this year, Diarra, who has had a great season. They have options, and New York, I think it's been since 1973. Uh, they have an opportunity, and could you imagine? I think when you look at these teams remaining in regards to what's best for the NBA, how amazing would that be for the NBA if the New York Knicks won? It would be incredible. They have an opportunity for sure.
Yeah, and that again has been like a little side narrative, particularly on a place like Twitter all season. Really, is that Adam Silver would love big market teams to be doing this. He wouldn't like small market teams to be going as well as the OKC Thunder are going, for example. So maybe Adam Silver's got something in that little rigged bag of his that everyone likes to talk about, where New York can find their way in this series. Maybe the refs just suddenly flip their own narrative in the finals of it's New York and OKC in the finals and decide that OKC gets no whistle from now on. This is New York's whistle. It belongs in the suburbs of NYC. We will see anyway. But we'll flip over to the OKC Thunder in their series with the Lakers. Drew, me and you both had this as a sweep. Not a great deal of surprises throughout it. Shout out to the Lakers on a great season for even getting to the second round, especially with the health of the lack of health of Luka Doncic getting to the stage. Austin Reeves looking increasingly banged up as the playoffs went on, having come into them injured. It's kind of hard not to flip to what will LeBron do next now. I think me and you've discussed this a couple of times in the podcast this season. I don't see LeBron leaving without a retirement tour, to be honest. So I'm kind of banking on the idea that LeBron will still be on an NBA team next season. Whether that's the Lakers or not, remains to be seen what happens in free agency there. But You mentioned about a couple of teams already who've been kind of playing with house money in the playoffs. The Lakers are playing with house money. They've left the casino. They're off on a sun lounger somewhere in Cancun now. And to be honest, I don't think anyone could have any real gripes about that.
Yeah, it's absolutely no analysis to this series. I mean, it unfolded exactly how we all thought it was. I guess the only narrative is that, LeBron James is amazing and incredible to be able to, go to toe to toe with a young OKC team. If it does anything, I think it hinders OKC because now they've gone 8-0, and San Antonio is going to meet them being battle tested twice because Portland, although it was a 4-1, Portland gave them problems because of how hard they played. Minnesota is sharpening their knives, whereas OKC is cruising, and I think it's going to hinder them when it comes to the conference finals. You mentioned about LeBron, because that is the only narrative to talk about this series, is that I do not see him just walking off into the sunset. I'd be stunned if he does. However, it's not just in his hands. There is a scenario where the Lakers just say, you know what, actually, we don't want you back. And the only scenario I can see that unfolding is at the age of 41 years old. You got your nice, comfy mansion there in LA. You got another one being built that's been in the process of being built for like 2 years. You know you're going to live the rest of your life there. It's very difficult to say, let me uproot my routine, my lifestyle just for one season. Let me go to cold Cleveland just for 1 year. We know LeBron likes to golf now. That is the only scenario where I'm just like, he could just be like, you know what? I'm too old for this. Like, I don't have time to be learning the new training staff, a new system, and all this. For what? To ring chase a situation that doesn't guarantee you a ring. Now, if you want to just play because of strictly the love of the game, I'm cool with that. But to ring chase, I just don't see him having the energy to want to do that at the age of 41 years old.
Let me pitch you something then, Drew, because I love doing this just mainly for social clips. To be honest, LeBron James, the contract is up in the off season. The Lakers decide not to renew because they want to keep it on the Luka Doncic timeline now. Maybe they want to pay Austin Reeves, whoever. The Golden State Warriors just extended Steve Kerr for 2 years, and I was like, 2 years is an interesting amount of time, isn't it? Maybe that's just enough time to give LeBron a little 2 year retirement plan alongside Jimmy Butler, alongside his Akron same hospital buddy Steph Curry. Keeps his mansion in LA, stays in the sunshine of California, doesn't have to put up with the snow and the hailstones the size of golf balls in Cleveland. Who says no to that?
Interesting. I never even thought about that. I don't know if this show ever was shown here in the UK. Have you ever heard of a show called Golden Girls?
I have heard of it. I don't know if it was ever shown here, but I have heard of it.
Okay, well, it was a show in the U.S. as a kid. I used to grow up. My grandma used to watch. It consisted of the lifestyle of four old ladies. And what do old ladies do? They go play bingo. They go do old people stuff. That is what it would be in Golden State. It would be the golden men of these old guys, just one last hurrah. Now, if they wanted to do that, just to, because when you look at Golden State, they are limited, right? And they are not on a championship timeline. If you do this for entertainment and just for, let's just see, let's have fun. Let's let Kerr go out with the bang. I'm with it. It would be a great storyline, and they would have a lot of national televised games. But if there's any reason that you're talking about possibly winning the championship, forget about it.
Yeah, sorry to LeBron if he is listening. I don't think you're going to Golden State for a championship, but a year or two of playing with Steph Curry. If it's two, by the way, I'd be shocked. But yeah, at least one more year of playing with Steph Curry. You've played with your son now. You don't need to wait for Bryce to come into the league. Just give us all what we want. Give you and Steph Curry on the same team. As I say, that Akron, Ohio connection would surely be at least entertaining to watch. Speaking of entertaining to watch, Drew, the NBA Draft Lottery was one that served up a lot of narratives from this season. Quite incredible, really, in the way it went for so many reasons. Obviously, for me as a Clippers fan, probably the biggest winners of the day, really, having had that Pacers pick 4 to 5, having OKC's pick stay exactly where it is, the one that we gave to them. But for those who maybe didn't see for whatever reason, the Washington Wizards got the number 1 overall pick. The Utah Jazz got the number 2 overall pick. Memphis at 3, Chicago at 4. As I say, the Clippers at 5, Nets at 6, Kings at 7, who fell. Just Sacramento Kings constantly finding ways to fail and funnier ways to fail. Quite hilarious at this stage, to be honest. Sorry, Sacramento fans. Atlanta at 8, Dallas at 9, Milwaukee at 10, Golden State at 11, as I mentioned, OKC at 12, Miami at 13, and the Charlotte Hornets at 14. Was there anything else that leaped out for you from that, Drew? Like, if I'm a Washington Wizards fan, I'm very excited about the idea that you can add, Darren Peterson or AJ DeBonsa to that roster. It makes the Davis and Trae Young thing slightly strange in this like dual timeline universe. Maybe less so Trae Young, more so Anthony Davis. Maybe there's something you can do with Anthony Davis that really leans into how elite and young that roster can really be. If I'm the Utah Jazz, I'm very excited because, not dissimilar. They've got, 2 timelines to their thing, but the chance again at Darren Peterson or an AJ DeBonsa, especially because there's that Utah connection with AJ DeBonsa as well. I'd be really interested to, sort of see him stay in Utah if he does fall to that number 2. And, I think anywhere outside the top 4, there is, more of a drop off there, but definitely exciting for those teams who are in the top 4.
Yeah, I think Washington and Utah, they put themselves in a position to be very flexible, and there is no excuse why they shouldn't be competitive next season. Their rosters
For
are
sure.
already, they're both of these teams' core is very solid, and they get to both add to um, franchise altering players. So things are looking right, and the timing is perfect, right, Josh? Because if you guys don't know out there that the lottery system is changing next year, you get there's a consequence for finishing in the bottom 3. And when I look at all these teams in the lottery, Chicago even have a top 4 pick, which is great for them. Everyone should be in a position to move forward in their future. Milwaukee should be able to get a lot of asset, not a lot, because I'm not paying a lot of assets for Giannis. But everyone it should be solid. Obviously, Dallas is probably will probably be in that bottom 3 next year. Wouldn't surprise me. But the only team, when I look at it, obviously it hurt the Brooklyn Nets. I think that hurt for them. If there's any team that it really hurts. But I got an opportunity to lead my first NBA game on Friday, which was dope. And I led it with the one and only Mo Mootsie, the hoop genius. Which, with how cool is that? One of the best NBA analysts we have in this country. And one thing that he mentioned to me off air there was that the Sacramento Kings really deserve the number 1 pick, and to see them fall into 7, they're the only team I look at and say, man, what a catastrophe. Like, what do you do? Because you have a bunch of pieces of the puzzle that do not fit. You have no flexibility. I don't even know if they have any money. They're not like Brooklyn, where they have, in Chicago, where they have a ton of cash. They are just, I see the bottom 3 next year being Sacramento, New Orleans, and probably Dallas.
Yeah, and there should be a lot of teams that want to take a leap there as well, Drew. The draft class for next season and the next few seasons. I was listening to, I think it was the Zach Lowe show the other day. They had like a draft class specialist guy on. His name evades me, so sorry about that. But he was kind of saying like the high school class that's coming out at the moment is like an all time bad class, really. So the next few draft classes are not going to be anything really to shout about. It did make me think about all those lottery changes and how you basically have to have a maths degree to understand any of them, because like it may be closing the door after the horse has bolted. Like the reason to tank was last season and this season. There's going to be no incentive to tank next season because the draft class is not necessarily going to get you a franchise altering player. And so there's so many teams on that board there. I don't know if I agree with you on the Milwaukee front. I think there'll be a team who does pay a lot for Giannis, because I still think Giannis guarantees you a lot of wins. And if you are set up for other areas of playoff success, then I think Giannis can really take you to the dance in that sense. But there's a lot of teams there who I think should just be making big swings now this season. That floor of talent that I mentioned being so high this season should only really increase going into next season, because nobody should want to be in those relegation spots next season.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, with someone like Milwaukee, if someone does pay, like, does 4 first-round draft picks bring me value? I need to have talent now because, as you mentioned, the draft classes aren't as strong. So you would hope they would be able to get young talent in return. I'm just not. I'm just the way the NBA is constructed now, like there's not a lot of players that I'm gonna pay 4 first round picks from. Especially when you say that someone is in their 30s, they've had a bunch of soft tissue injuries. Those tissue injuries don't get stronger, right? They get weaker. Hamstrings get weaker, calves get weaker. So I'm not paying, as great as Giannis is, I'm not paying for. Now, two, I think is fair with the player, but I think the way these aprons and everything is, and the way these teams, all you gotta do is look at the Knicks, look at the OKC, look at San Antonio. You have to have a deep roster, so you can't mortgage your future on one player because you got to give a lot up to get that guy. So I think the days of these, like the Mikal Bridges 4 first round picks, the Desmond Baines first round picks, those days are gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Be interesting to see. I think if for no other reason, the price has probably gone up because teams don't necessarily want to be bad next season with Giannis. But we will see who is in those sweepstakes and who is looking to get Giannis Antetokounmpo in the offseason. There's going to be a lot to discuss in the offseason. I think me and Drew have not yet discussed how often we'll record in the offseason, but we may just be dictated to by the news, to be honest, because I can imagine there being trades left, right, and centre. But that is all to be focused on in the future. We still have NBA playoff basketball to continue to dissect. We will be doing so once again next week. So all that's left for me to do this week is to say, Drew, lead us out.
Yeah, we haven't even discussed about the off season, but we'll have our production meeting live on air. But I think a hot take approach. If it's cool, we'll stay cool. But as soon as something pops up, we'll pop our head up. And the off season is crazy. I think if there'll be a lot of hot takes out there that you guys will want to hear, and that Josh and I would want to put our finger on. But by the time we come back next week, it will be the Eastern Conference and Western Conference finals. Who will it be? It's looking like, it's a foregone conclusion with 3 teams, but with Cleveland and Detroit, it's a complete toss up. And we shall see. Make sure you come back on next week and we will be able to break it down for you here on the crossover. Catch you guys next week.